the Ricklantis Mixup, is so heavily packed with so much, it's ridiculous they managed to fit it all into one episode. It's got not 1, 2, or even 3 stories, but 4 storylines in one episode. And obviously, spoilers ahead, so if you haven't seen it yet, don't watch any further. First of all, our Rick C0137, decimated the Citadel of Ricks back in the Rick Shank Redemption, episode 1 of season 3. Partly because the Citadel were trying to kill him, partly because Rick hates any kind of organised government, partly because he wanted to take down the Galactic Federation, and partly because he hates himself and every reincarnation of himself. Now all the Ricks and Mortys of the Citadel are trying to rebuild and live together in a democratic, capitalist society. This is fascinating first of all because we know every Rick is hyper intelligent, and most Ricks are the most intelligent mammals in their respective universes. But when they're all put together in a capitalist society, some Ricks come out on top with money, power, and high job titles, whereas others become factory workers, police officers, plumbers. This happens with the Mortys as well. Rickless Mortys are put into school to be taught how to be good sidekicks. In both scenarios, the emphasis is on the minimization of the uniqueness of the individual in order for that individual to fit into society. Essentially, making sure enough people have their individuality sufficiently minimized so that they can be moving cogs in the machine that is society.
Don't you get it? They told us we were special because we were Ricks, but they stripped us of everything that made us unique.
This is the doing of capitalism. Capitalism forces us into boxes because a capitalist society is such that a person has to specialize in one thing for most of their lives in order to survive. The thing they specialize in must be useful to someone else in society in some way. Otherwise, no one would pay them for doing the thing they specialize in. This forces most people into boxes. Boxes with labels like politician, hairdresser, factory supervisor, newsreader, criminal, etc. These capitalist boxes often end up defining who we are as individuals. One of the most common questions when two people meet is, so what do you do? We humans have a need to label and define things, and we often define each other by our professions, and this is a direct result of living in a capitalist society. Being educated according to what someone else deems worthy of being taught, learning a profession and then doing it for most of one's time, so that any spare time a person does have is spent recovering from work time, having others define us by what we do, all serves to dampen and almost remove a person's unique individuality. The entire society in the Citadel of Ricks shows this. There is an interesting question here about the subject of nature versus nurture. That is, are we mostly products of our genes or of our environments and upbringings? Different Ricks and Mortys have different personalities. Some are cool, some are submissive, some are not so intelligent, but nearly all of them have the same character traits which makes a Rick or a Morty a Morty. Nearly every Rick is generally rude, nihilistic and gassy, and nearly every Morty is passive, confused and searching for meaning. Does this mean we're products of both our nature and our nurture? Perhaps there are certain characteristics which are innate, and other characteristics which have come about through experience and upbringing. Another form of obvious capitalism in this episode are the commercials of simple Ricks. Rick, as the most intelligent being in the universe, and the biggest nihilist you've ever come across, couldn't give two shits about capitalism, advertising or making money. And yet, put all the Ricks together in society, and even they start trying to sell stuff to each other, and the shit that simple Ricks sell appeals to all Ricks directly, because they sell exactly what the Ricks in the Citadel lack, which actually, as a side note, is a genius of a good advertising campaign. Offer something your target market needs, and then pose it to them as if they couldn't live without it. But that's just a capitalist in me talking. Firstly, they sell Rick's happiness in the form of family love and emotional connection, something which Rick often denies he needs and often says is stupid and primitive, but really is the only thing which gives his life any real meaning, the only thing that can go against his vehement nihilism. Second, they start selling the idea of freedom, something which Ricks in the Citadel crave. And funnily enough, they've brought about their own lack of freedom by trying to live together as a society. The police storyline subverts the traditional narrative, something that this show loves to do, in that a Morty is a commanding officer over a Rick. This isn't the first time Morty's been promoted from sidekick to leader, as we saw in Meeseek, but this particular Morty hates the notion of being a sidekick.
Call me a sidekick one more time!
As a sidekick, Morty is often the voice of reason, meaning, and moral responsibility. But as a leader, as an autonomous agent, he loses his morality and becomes corrupted, using worse tactics than the criminals he's trying to catch. Rick, on the other hand, becomes the voice of reason as the sidekick, the moral compass. Switch around the leader and sidekick roles, and morality seems to shift as well. This is a commentary on global policing in general, how the lines of moral responsibility can become blurred and how corruption can easily ensue in order to get results, although we won't get into that too much right now. The biggest storyline in this episode is obviously the election, and consequently President Morty. This Morty, the one who rises to power above all the Ricks, who does this by appealing to the higher ideals of the population through promises to improve society, is the evil Morty we met back in Close Rick Counters of the Rick Kind, the Morty who controlled the evil robotic Rick. We don't know who this Morty is. He gives a politician's answer when he's asked who his Rick is and where he's from, but we do know he has a plan. We could call him Evil Morty, but Rick could also be classed as evil himself, because he's a nihilist and doesn't care about anything, which, by classical definitions, could be considered evil, because he has no issue killing all kinds of beings and destroying worlds. Evil Morty's rise to power is hugely reminiscent of certain events in history, where a charismatic leader rises up from obscurity and wins the favour of the people, despite popular opinion that they won't, only to bring in a totalitarian regime and rule with an iron fist. This has happened many times, so many times that it's been fictionalized many times more, most notably in V for Vendetta, which, if anyone asks, is brilliant. Evil Morty and Rick and Morty C0137 will obviously cross paths again. It will be very interesting to see where this Morty is from and where his motivations lie. Obviously I haven't covered everything in this episode. I've missed out the questions about pay gaps, about guns and crime in poor and deprived areas. There's just so much in this episode I could talk for another hour, but I won't. Thank you for watching. Comment below and hit subscribe. You know you want to. Until next time.